What is happening here?
There's nothing left to say right now about that.
In any marriage or relationship, getting in trouble with your spouse should never be the norm. Unfortunately, in the case of Kody and Robin Brown, this toxic dynamic seems to be not only the norm, but the foundation of their dysfunctional marriage. Sister Wives has given us an inside look into the complex world of polygamy, and while we've seen the unique challenges of managing multiple spouses, it's clear that Kody and Robin's relationship has taken an unhealthy turn. Unlike the love and commitment that a healthy marriage is built on, the power struggles, emotional manipulation, and the constant feeling of getting in trouble is what characterizes their relationship. Robin, who initially presented herself as the devoted wife trying to balance multiple relationships, has increasingly been seen in a more toxic light. She is constantly seen in the center of controversy due to her role as Kody's favorite wife, and the tension between her and the other wives, particularly Christine and Janelle, has grown more apparent over time. What does it mean to get in trouble in a marriage? At first glance, the idea of getting in trouble with your spouse might seem like a common issue, maybe a disagreement or conflict that leads to a temporary fallout. However, when it becomes a recurring theme in the marriage, it speaks to deeper underlying issues that go beyond just a disagreement. In a healthy relationship, spouses should be able to communicate, compromise, and resolve their differences without resorting to the feeling of punishment or constant reprimanding. For Kody and Robin, this constant cycle of getting in trouble isn't just about occasional misunderstandings, it's a toxic pattern. One of the most troubling aspects is Kody's tendency to act out in a controlling and dismissive manner, especially toward his other wives. This behavior often leaves Robin caught between trying to placate Kody and dealing with the fallout of her influence over him. Her constant emotional labor in this setup creates a toxic environment that leaves everyone, including Robin, feeling unsupported and emotionally drained. Kody's emotional distance and his need for control. Kody's behavior in his marriages, especially with Robin, can be attributed to a desire for control. As a polygamist, he was supposed to be the leader of the family, maintaining balance and fairness between his wives. But over time, his emotional investment has shifted predominantly toward Robin, creating a rift between him and his other wives. This imbalance in his affections has led to a lot of tension within the family and a breakdown in communication. It is in this context that the idea of getting in trouble within their marriage becomes even more problematic. In Kody's mind, he might see his power dynamics as a necessary part of maintaining control over the family. But this control is a form of emotional manipulation that not only isolates his wives, but creates a sense of constant tension. His treatment of his wives as less than equal partners often leaves them feeling invalidated. Robin, despite being the wife who has the most emotional pull with Kody, is often caught between defending her position and dealing with Kody's increasing emotional neglect toward the other wives. This leaves her emotionally drained, unable to feel secure or validated in her own relationship. The emotional toll that this creates isn't just felt by Kody's wives, it extends to their children as well. Children who are raised in an environment where their father is emotionally volatile and where their mother is frequently in the middle of power struggles can grow up confused, anxious, and unsure of the meaning of a healthy relationship. The roots of the trouble, a system of unresolved conflict. As viewers, it's easy to see that much of the trouble in Kody and Robin's relationship stems from unresolved conflict. Their relationship is built on unaddressed emotional issues that have only escalated over time. From Kody's rigid and dismissive treatment of his other wives to Robin's struggle to maintain harmony in the family, the unresolved tensions have festered beneath the surface, affecting everyone involved. For Robin, her initial attempts to be the supportive and loving wife were overtaken by the emotional labor required to keep Kody happy and maintain the image of a united family. She entered the family dynamic as Kody's newest wife, the one who was supposed to help reinvigorate the family's unity, but instead, she became a central figure in a web of emotional manipulation. Kody, who had already been emotionally distant from his other wives, began to focus more on Robin, causing friction with the other women who were being emotionally neglected. Mary, Christine, and Janelle each dealt with their emotional struggles in different ways. Mary's continued emotional isolation, Christine's heartbreaking realization that she was never truly loved by Kody, and Janelle's growing frustration with Kody's favoritism all contributed to the atmosphere of emotional neglect. The constant tension and unresolved conflict left Robin in a position where she was constantly getting in trouble, either by acting as Kody's emotional crutch or by defending her role in a family that was no longer united. Robin's role in Kody's emotional world, a codependent relationship. One of the most fascinating aspects of Kody and Robin's relationship is the degree of emotional codependency between them. Codependency often manifests in relationships where one partner feels they are responsible for the emotional well-being of the other, often to the detriment of both. In this case, Robin seems to constantly absorb the emotional brunt of Kody's needs and the conflict between him and his other wives. In a healthy relationship, both partners should be able to rely on each other for emotional support, without one person being burdened with the emotional needs of the other. However, in Robin and Kody's marriage, Robin has become Kody's emotional anchor. She is often the one who comforts him when he feels frustrated with his other wives or when he is struggling with his role as a husband. But this emotional reliance on Robin has made her relationship with Kody a high-pressure one, where she is constantly trying to keep him happy and stable, often at the cost of her own happiness. This codependent dynamic creates a cycle of emotional turmoil in their marriage. Robin, in trying to keep Kody emotionally stable, often disregards her own needs and sacrifices her emotional well-being for the sake of the family. At the same time, Kody's inability to balance his emotional connection with all of his wives only intensifies the pressure on Robin to constantly make things right. This creates an endless loop of emotional labor, with both parties feeling constantly dissatisfied and frustrated. The impact on the family, why it's not normal to get in trouble with your spouse. The real danger of this dynamic is the long-term emotional damage it can cause to everyone involved. When the relationship between a husband and wife becomes defined by constant conflict and emotional strain, it affects not only their connection, but the entire family structure. The children, who are the innocent bystanders in this family drama, begin to internalize these unhealthy dynamics. They may grow up believing that emotional instability is a normal part of family life, and that getting in trouble with a spouse is a standard way of resolving conflict. For the wives, the emotional toll is even more evident. As the years have gone on, Christine, Janelle, and Mary each have come to realize that the unhealthy dynamics in their marriages are not something that can be resolved with compromise alone. For Christine, her decision to leave Kody was a necessary act of self-preservation. For Janelle and Mary, the ongoing emotional strain has led to an emotional detachment from Kody that cannot be repaired by mere apologies or promises of change. For Robin, the constant pressure of trying to keep Kody happy while managing her role in a fractured family has left her emotionally drained and exhausted. She is stuck in a position where she feels she must defend Kody's actions, even if it means undermining her own happiness. This type of emotional manipulation and strain is not only unfair to Robin, but harmful to her own emotional well-being. Conclusion: the path to healing. It is important to understand that a healthy marriage doesn't revolve around a cycle of getting in trouble or emotional manipulation. A marriage should be a partnership based on mutual respect, open communication, and emotional support. The breakdown of Kody and Robin's marriage and the fractured relationships within the Brown family serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of unhealthy power dynamics and emotional neglect. In order for healing to begin, each member of the Brown family must take responsibility for their actions and work toward emotional accountability. This is no small feat, especially in a family as complex and public as theirs. However, only by breaking free from toxic patterns can Kody, Robin, and the other wives hope to rebuild their relationships, both with each other and with themselves. In the world of sister wives, Kody Brown was always seen as the patriarch of the family, the one who was supposed to lead, provide, and maintain order in a household that was anything but conventional. Polygamy, by nature, requires a delicate balance of emotions, schedules, and household management. Yet, over time, it became clear that Kody's role as the leader of the family was not as much about maintaining harmony as it was about asserting control over his wives. A healthy relationship, whether monogamous or polygamous, is built on equality, mutual respect, and communication. However, Kody's approach to polygamy has often been about asserting dominance over his wives, with Robin's position as his favorite wife further fueling this imbalance. His need for control has been one of the driving forces behind the turmoil within the family. Kody has openly admitted in past seasons of Sister Wives that he values the pecking order in his relationships, and that hierarchy has caused resentment and division between him and his wives. This power dynamic often results in what we see as the wives getting in trouble. Kody's behavior toward his wives is sometimes like that of a parent disciplining a child. His expectations are unspoken, and when they aren't met, he often acts out, creating conflict. This not only affects his relationships with his wives, but also leaves them questioning their worth within the family. The emotional toll of living in such an environment of inequality is not only unhealthy, but as we see, unsustainable. The unequal treatment of wives, favoritism, and its effects. A glaring example of Kody's unhealthy power dynamics is the favoritism he has shown toward Robin. From the beginning of their marriage, Robin was positioned as the one Kody could confide in and rely on. Over time, Robin began to take precedence, with Kody often shifting his attention to her while neglecting the emotional needs of his other wives. As a result, his relationships with Christine, Janelle, and Mary began to fracture. In a healthy polygamous marriage, it is expected that the husband would give equal attention and affection to each of his wives. But Kody's treatment of Robin has been far from equitable. He has often neglected his other wives emotionally, leading to feelings of inadequacy and resentment. Robin, by virtue of being Kody's favorite, found herself in a position where she was both the recipient of his emotional investment and the one to defend Kody's actions when he failed to live up to his promises to the other wives. This favoritism has caused deep divisions within the family. Christine, who left Kody after years of emotional neglect, was one of the first to openly express her frustrations with Kody's behavior. She felt unseen and unappreciated, especially as Kody's attention and affection became increasingly centered on Robin. Janelle, too, found herself emotionally distant from Kody as he spent more time with Robin, leading to her own disengagement from the family dynamic. Mary, on the other hand, had already been emotionally isolated for years before the favoritism grew more obvious, but she also felt the strain of being relegated to a secondary position in Kody's eyes. The strain on Robin, caught between Kody and the other wives. While Kody may be the one with the ultimate control over the family structure,
one of the most devastating aspects of Kody Brown's relationships with his wives is the constant emotional neglect they endure. Emotional neglect is often the silent killer in relationships. While there may be no physical abuse or overt conflict, the slow erosion of emotional intimacy and support leads to irreparable damage. Kody's behavior toward his wives is a textbook example of this. He has consistently failed to meet the emotional needs of his wives, especially Christine, Janelle, and Mary, leading to their eventual dissatisfaction and emotional withdrawal from the family dynamic. What is emotional neglect? It's when one partner consistently fails to offer the emotional support, care, and attention that the other partner needs. In a healthy marriage, partners are there for each other during difficult times, offering empathy, listening, and understanding. However, in Kody's case, his disregard for the emotional well-being of his wives has been blatant. His emotional focus has been solely on Robin, leaving Christine, Janelle, and Mary to deal with their feelings of isolation, rejection, and abandonment on their own. Christine's struggles, the breaking point. Christine Brown's departure from Kody was not an impulsive decision. It was the result of years of emotional neglect and frustration. Christine had long been one of Kody's most supportive wives, always putting in the effort to maintain a harmonious family dynamic. However, despite her best efforts, she began to feel invisible in Kody's eyes, as his attention and affection were increasingly directed toward Robin. Over time, Christine realized that her emotional needs were never going to be met, and the relationship had become one-sided. For years, Christine had been carrying the emotional weight of the family, trying to balance her roles as a wife, a mother, and a spiritual partner in a family that was meant to support her. But Kody's growing emotional distance left her feeling isolated and unimportant. She had reached a breaking point where the emotional toll of being in a marriage that made her feel unseen and unheard was simply too much to bear. The lack of emotional support and validation from Kody eventually led to Christine's decision to leave, marking the end of one of the most painful chapters in her life. Christine's decision to leave was a pivotal moment in the Sister Wives series, but it was not a decision made overnight. It was the culmination of years of emotional neglect, frustration, and heartbreak. Kody, however, seemed shocked by Christine's departure, refusing to acknowledge the role his emotional neglect played in pushing her away. His reaction was typical of someone who had never learned to listen to his wife's emotional needs. Instead of taking accountability for his behavior, he projected blame on Christine, refusing to see that her decision to leave was a direct result of his actions. Janelle's emotional withdrawal, feeling like an afterthought. Janelle Brown's emotional withdrawal from Kody is another example of how emotional neglect can slowly erode a relationship. Janelle has long been a stoic and independent wife, but over time she began to realize that Kody was no longer emotionally present for her. While Kody was putting his energy into Robin, Janelle was left feeling like an afterthought. She was often left out of important decisions and excluded from family activities. Like Christine, Janelle had once hoped that her relationship with Kody would improve, but as the years went on, it became clear that Kody's emotional availability was a scarce commodity. Janelle's frustration with Kody's lack of emotional presence became more evident as time went on. While she had once tried to maintain a semblance of harmony in the family, Janelle began to recognize that Kody's favoritism toward Robin was not something that was going to change. This realization led to her emotional detachment from Kody and the family dynamic as a whole. Janelle no longer felt the need to put effort into a marriage that was emotionally one-sided. Instead, she began to focus more on her own personal well-being, opting to step back from the emotional chaos that Kody had created. Janelle's withdrawal was not a sign of weakness. Rather, it was a survival mechanism. She had reached a point where she could no longer emotionally invest in a relationship that was draining her. While Kody may have seen this as a rejection of him, it was actually a healthy decision for Janelle. In order to protect her own emotional health, she had to distance herself from the toxic emotional environment that Kody had created. Mary's isolation, the loneliness of being emotionally abandoned. Mary Brown's emotional neglect story is one of the saddest examples of how Kody's behavior has destroyed his marriages. Mary's isolation within the family became increasingly apparent as Kody's emotional favoritism toward Robin grew stronger. Mary had already been struggling with her place in the family for years, but the increasing focus on Robin only intensified her sense of abandonment. Kody had emotionally checked out of his relationship with Mary long before Robin entered the picture, but Robin's rise as Kody's favorite wife only made the isolation more painful for Mary. Mary's emotional neglect wasn't just about Kody's lack of affection, it was about the erosion of her sense of self-worth within the family. Kody had stopped being the husband and partner that Mary had once relied on, leaving her to face the challenges of their marriage alone. The neglect she endured was not just about the absence of physical affection, but the absence of emotional support and validation. Mary's decision to stay in the family despite feeling emotionally abandoned was a testament to her enduring hope that things would change. But as the years went on, it became clear that Kody was not going to change his behavior, leaving Mary stuck in a relationship that no longer served her emotional needs. The emotional toll of being in a marriage where you feel constantly abandoned and unseen is profound. Mary's experience has highlighted how emotional neglect can wear down a person's spirit, leaving them questioning their worth and their role in the family. For Mary, the emotional toll was unbearable, but she chose to stay, hoping that Kody's neglect would eventually subside. Unfortunately, it never did. Kody's inability to empathize, a dangerous pattern. A key factor in the emotional neglect of his wives is Kody's inability to empathize with their feelings. In a healthy relationship, empathy plays a crucial role in understanding and supporting each other's emotional needs. However, Kody's behavior has shown that he lacks the ability to truly connect with his wives on an emotional level. Instead of listening to their concerns and validating their feelings, Kody often deflects blame or ignores their needs altogether. This lack of empathy has created a toxic environment where his wives feel unheard, invalidated, and emotionally abandoned. Kody's lack of emotional awareness is particularly troubling because as the head of a plural family, he has a unique responsibility to ensure that all of his wives feel loved, respected, and emotionally supported. Instead, his inability to show empathy has led to a breakdown in communication and an emotional distance that is hard to repair. The emotional cost of being in trouble, internalized self-doubt and resentment. When emotional neglect becomes a constant theme in a relationship, it has profound effects on the individuals involved. The wives of Kody Brown, Christine, Janelle, and Mary, and even Robin, have all experienced varying degrees of emotional neglect, leaving them with a deep sense of self-doubt, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. This constant getting in trouble, without the opportunity for resolution, creates a ripple effect throughout the family, affecting not only the emotional health of the wives, but also the children who witness the tension and dysfunction. For Christine, the emotional neglect ultimately led her to leave Kody and take control of her own life. For Janelle and Mary, the emotional strain has caused them to emotionally withdraw from Kody, leading to disengagement from the family. Even Robin, who initially held a strong emotional bond with Kody, now finds herself caught in the emotional fallout of years of neglect and emotional manipulation. Conclusion: the need for emotional healing. The emotional neglect and neglect of emotional needs in Kody's marriages are clear signs of how emotional healthy power dynamics can lead to the breakdown of relationships. In any marriage, especially one that involves multiple partners, emotional well-being must be a priority. Kody's inability to nurture and support his wives has created a toxic cycle that cannot continue if the family is to heal and move forward. For true healing to occur, Kody must confront his emotional neglect and take responsibility for the damage it has caused. Emotional withholding is a form of manipulation that is both subtle and damaging in relationships. It involves one partner deliberately withholding emotional support, attention, or affection as a means of control or punishment. In the case of Kody Brown, emotional withholding has been a consistent theme throughout his marriages. He uses this tactic to create emotional distance, especially when his wives do not meet their expectations or challenge his authority in the family. Kody's emotional withholding is not a random occurrence. It's a deliberate strategy he employs to assert control over his wives. When he feels that his wives have stepped out of line or challenged his authority, instead of addressing the issue directly or communicating in a healthy way, he withdraws emotionally. This creates a power imbalance where Kody is the one in control, and his wives are left to constantly chase his approval and affection. This form of emotional manipulation is particularly damaging because it leaves the wives feeling invisible, rejected, and unworthy of Kody's attention. Instead of resolving conflicts through communication and understanding, Kody's emotional withholding creates a toxic atmosphere where his wives are left wondering what they did wrong and how they can regain his favor. This form of emotional manipulation is particularly damaging because it leaves the wives feeling invisible, rejected, and unworthy of Kody's attention. For Christine, the emotional neglect ultimately led her to leave Kody and take control of her own life. For Janelle and Mary, the emotional strain has caused them to emotionally withdraw from Kody, leading to disengagement from the family. Even Robin, who initially held a strong emotional bond with Kody, now finds herself caught in the emotional fallout of years of neglect and emotional manipulation. The impact of rejection, how it affects the self-worth of Kody's wives.
Emotional withholding, especially when it is used repeatedly, has a devastating effect on the self-worth of the person being rejected. In the case of Kody's wives, it has led to a deep sense of insecurity and self-doubt. For Mary, Christine, and Janelle, the emotional rejection from Kody has left them feeling inadequate and worthy of Kody's attention. They have all struggled with feelings of inadequacy, wondering why Kody doesn't seem to care for them in the same way he cares for Robyn. Christine, for instance, went through years of feeling emotionally neglected by Kody, despite her best efforts to maintain the family dynamic and keep the peace. The constant rejection she felt from Kody, especially as his attention shifted more toward Robyn, eroded her self-esteem and ultimately contributed to her decision to leave him. Christine no longer felt worthy of being loved or valued in her marriage to Kody. This sense of rejection, compounded by the emotional toll of living in a family that favoritism ruled, was the final push she needed to walk away from a relationship that had become emotionally toxic. Janelle, who has always been a more independent wife, also experienced Kody's emotional withholding. While she may have tried to hide her hurt, Janelle's emotional withdrawal was her way of protecting herself from further rejection. The emotional distance she felt from Kody led her to disengage from the family dynamic, and instead of challenging Kody, she chose to step back and let the situation unfold without her input. In many ways, Janelle's withdrawal was an attempt to shield herself from the emotional damage that Kody's rejection was causing. Mary's emotional neglect wasn't just about Kody's lack of affection, it was about the erosion of her sense of self-worth within the family. Kody had stopped being the husband and partner that Mary had once relied on, leaving her to face the challenges of their marriage alone. The neglect she endured was not just about the absence of physical affection, but the absence of emotional support and validation. Mary's decision to stay in the family despite feeling emotionally abandoned was a testament to her enduring hope that things would change. But as the years went on, it became clear that Kody was not going to change his behavior, leaving Mary stuck in a relationship that no longer served her emotional needs. The emotional toll of being in a marriage where you feel constantly abandoned and unseen is profound. Mary's experience has highlighted how emotional neglect can wear down a person's spirit, leaving them questioning their worth and their role in the family. For Mary, the emotional toll was unbearable, but she chose to stay, hoping that Kody's neglect would eventually subside. Unfortunately, it never did. Kody's inability to empathize, a dangerous pattern. A key factor in the emotional neglect of his wives is Kody's inability to empathize with their feelings. In a healthy relationship, empathy plays a crucial role in understanding and supporting each other's emotional needs. However, Kody's behavior has shown that he lacks the ability to truly connect with his wives on an emotional level. Instead of listening to their concerns and validating their feelings, Kody often deflects blame or ignores their needs altogether. This lack of empathy has created a
When we talk about relationships, particularly those in a high-stress, high-demand environment like the Brown family, it's crucial to address the mental health implications of toxic dynamics. In Kody's marriage to his wives, the emotional neglect, favoritism, and constant getting in trouble are not just damaging in terms of interpersonal relationships, they also deeply affect the psychological well-being of his wives. Over time, emotional neglect and emotional manipulation can contribute to anxiety, depression, and other serious mental health issues. For Kody's wives, their mental health has been impacted by years of emotional withdrawal, rejection, and the chronic stress of living in an environment where they are always uncertain about where they stand. This psychological toll can result in a range of symptoms: feelings of worthlessness, self-doubt, loneliness, and even hopelessness. All of these feelings contribute to the breakdown of relationships and the weakening of family bonds. Christine, Janelle, and Mary, each in their own way, have dealt with these emotional issues. They have lived for years in a state of anxiety about whether Kody truly loves them or if they will always be seen as second-class wives, unworthy of his emotional investment. This uncertainty about their place in the family leaves them with little sense of security or peace. Emotional neglect, when sustained over long periods, can manifest as anxiety or depression, and this is something that has been clearly visible in the Brown family's interactions. Christine's emotional exhaustion, the breaking point. Christine Brown's journey in Sister Wives has been a compelling, heartbreaking narrative of emotional exhaustion. For years, she tried to hold the family together, supporting Kody and keeping the peace. Yet, despite her efforts, Kody's emotional neglect became impossible to ignore. The turning point for Christine came when she realized that no matter how much love and attention she gave to the family, it would never be reciprocated in the way she needed it to be. Kody's emotional distance, especially as he lavished affection on Robyn, wore down Christine's self-esteem and her belief in her worth as Kody's wife. Christine's departure was not a decision made lightly, nor was it an impulsive one. It was the culmination of years of mental strain, emotional neglect, and a growing sense of powerlessness. The weight of constantly being in emotional turmoil and feeling unheard and unseen by her husband took a toll on Christine's mental health. The emotional exhaustion she experienced was intense, and it reached a point where she could no longer continue in a marriage where she was expected to endure emotional neglect for the sake of maintaining the family structure. Kody's failure to acknowledge his role in her emotional suffering made it clear to Christine that she could not remain in the marriage any longer. For her, leaving Kody was an act of self-preservation. It was her way of reclaiming her mental and emotional health, even if it meant stepping away from a family she had long been a part of. Janelle struggles with anxiety, trying to stay in control. Janelle Brown's experience is another example of how emotional neglect can affect mental health. Janelle, who has always prided herself on being independent and self-sufficient, found herself struggling with anxiety in the wake of Kody's emotional withdrawal. While she may have kept up the appearance of being strong, it became increasingly clear that she was emotionally drained. Kody's refusal to acknowledge her emotional needs, coupled with his growing favoritism toward Robin, left Janelle feeling insecure and disconnected from Kody. This emotional neglect triggered anxiety and a sense of isolation that only worsened over time. The toll on Janelle's mental health was evident as she began to emotionally withdraw from Kody and the family. Anxiety is often a response to uncertainty, and in Janelle's case, the uncertainty about her position in the family was causing her to retreat into herself. She was unsure of where she stood with Kody, and this created a constant underlying anxiety that affected her daily life. When her emotional needs were ignored, Janelle started to feel less like a partner and more like a bystander in her own marriage. At some point, Janelle realized that continuing to stay in a marriage that caused her so much emotional distress was no longer sustainable. Her choice to step back from the family dynamic and disengage emotionally was her way of coping with the overwhelming anxiety she was experiencing. While it may have looked like a rejection of Kody, it was actually her way of protecting herself from further emotional harm. Mary's loneliness, an ongoing struggle with self-worth. Mary Brown's emotional struggles have been particularly heartbreaking to witness. For years, Mary has been the wife who has consistently been pushed to the sidelines of the family. From her emotional isolation to Kody's infidelities and his eventual emotional neglect, Mary has endured some of the harshest psychological tolls of any of the wives. The loneliness she has experienced in her marriage to Kody is not just about physical isolation. It's the deep emotional emptiness that comes from being consistently ignored and undervalued. Mary's struggle with self-worth has been a central theme in Sister Wives. She has long been plagued by feelings of inadequacy, and these feelings have only intensified as Kody's attention has shifted away from her in favor of Robin. Mary's mental health has been deeply impacted by the years of emotional neglect she has suffered. She has often talked about feeling invisible, a sentiment that speaks to the deep psychological wound she carries. Her decision to remain in the family despite this emotional neglect is a complex one. For Mary, leaving Kody would have meant leaving her family, but staying with him meant enduring years of emotional pain and neglect. This constant internal conflict contributed to Mary's ongoing struggle with self-worth, and her mental health has clearly suffered as a result. The long-term effects of emotional neglect, anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. The long-term effects of emotional neglect cannot be underestimated. For Christine, Janelle, Mary, and even Robin, the psychological damage caused by Kody's behavior has had lasting implications. Living in a constant state of emotional uncertainty, where affection is only given on Kody's terms and emotional needs are consistently ignored, has led to mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. These emotional scars are not easily healed and will likely affect these women for years to come. The role of communication in mental health. One of the key factors in maintaining mental health within relationships is communication. In any marriage, but especially in a polygamous one, it is essential for both partners to communicate their emotional needs and work together to meet them. However, Kody's lack of emotional communication with his wives, coupled with his unwillingness to acknowledge their needs, created a toxic environment where mental health issues have been allowed to fester. Communication is key in resolving conflict, building intimacy, and maintaining a healthy emotional connection. When one partner withholds emotional validation, it erodes the sense of security and trust that is necessary for a relationship to thrive. Kody's failure to communicate his feelings, coupled with his emotional neglect, has created a breeding ground for anxiety, depression, and emotional instability within the family. Moving toward healing, can the Brown family recover? Healing from emotional neglect and its associated mental health issues requires time, therapy, and a willingness to change. For the Brown family to recover, Kody must confront the damage he has caused and take responsibility for his actions. This means acknowledging the deep emotional wounds he has inflicted on his wives and actively working to rebuild the emotional connection that has been lost. Christine's departure was a necessary step toward healing for her, but for Janelle, Mary, and Robin, there is still much work to be done. If they are to find peace and rebuild their relationships, they must break free from the toxic cycle of emotional neglect and work toward creating an environment where their emotional needs are valued and respected. Conclusion: the need for emotional repair.
The psychological damage caused by years of emotional neglect in Kody's relationships cannot be overlooked. For Christine, Janelle, Mary, and Robin, their mental health has been deeply impacted by Kody's behavior. As the family moves forward, it is crucial for Kody to acknowledge his role in their suffering and take the necessary steps to repair the emotional damage that has been done. Only then can true healing begin. The emotional neglect, favoritism, and failure to meet the needs of his wives have created a devastating ripple effect throughout the Brown family. Kody's behavior, which has been ongoing for years, has led to the collapse of family unity, creating an environment where trust, respect, and communication are nearly impossible to maintain. The consequences of Kody's actions have gone far beyond the immediate pain experienced by his wives. They have also impacted the children and the overall family structure. For Kody, it seems that his focus on his own needs, desires, and emotional fulfillment has led him to neglect the needs of the very people who once supported him unconditionally. Instead of fostering a family environment built on mutual respect and shared responsibility, Kody's actions have created a fractured family dynamic, where each wife feels isolated, unimportant, and emotionally abandoned. Christine's departure was the first major crack in the foundation of the family, but it was not an isolated incident. As more wives began to recognize the emotional toll Kody's neglect was taking on them, they too began to withdraw. Janelle's emotional distance grew as she chose to disengage from Kody, while Mary, who had been emotionally neglected for years, found herself more and more alone in a family that no longer felt like home. This fracturation of the family structure is not just the result of one event. It is the cumulative effect of years of Kody's poor decisions and inability to address the emotional needs of his wives. The fallout has been significant, and it seems that the damage may be beyond repair unless Kody takes responsibility for his actions and makes a genuine effort to rebuild trust with each of his wives. Robin's role, an unintentional catalyst for division. Although Robin Brown is Kody's favorite wife and the one he appears to be most emotionally invested in, her role in the family dynamic has only served to amplify the divisions that already existed. While Robin may not have directly caused the emotional neglect of Kody's other wives, her position of favoritism has undoubtedly made it worse. For Christine, Janelle, and Mary, seeing Kody's preferential treatment of Robin created feelings of jealousy, resentment, and insecurity. They were forced to watch as Robin received the emotional validation, affection, and attention that they so desperately needed but were never given. Robin's position in the family, while not of her making, placed her at the center of a power struggle that she was ill-equipped to handle. Over time, Robin found herself caught between the other wives' frustration and Kody's emotional demands, creating an additional layer of tension that made it difficult for her to connect with her co-wives in a meaningful way. Robin has often been portrayed as the scapegoat in the family drama, but in many ways she has been a victim of the same toxic dynamics that have plagued Kody's marriages. While she may have been Kody's emotional confidant, her role in the family has come with its own emotional burden. Robin, like the other wives, has had to navigate the complex emotional landscape created by Kody's neglect and favoritism. Unfortunately, her involvement in this emotional turmoil has only fueled the divisions between her and the other wives, leading to a further breakdown in family unity. The children's experience, growing up in a divided home. The emotional fallout from Kody's behavior has not only affected his wives, but has also had a profound impact on the children within the family. Growing up in a polygamous family is already challenging enough, but when there is tension between the parents and emotional neglect running rampant, it creates an unstable environment for children to thrive in. For the Brown children, the division between their parents is evident. The favoritism Kody has shown toward Robin has created a rift between the children of each wife, as they struggle to understand why their father's attention is so focused on one wife and her children, while the others feel left out. This type of emotional inconsistency can lead to confusion.
The emotional neglect, favoritism, and failure to meet the needs of his wives have created a devastating ripple effect throughout the Brown family. Kody's behavior, which has been ongoing for years, has led to the collapse of family unity, creating an environment where trust, respect, and communication are nearly impossible to maintain. The consequences of Kody's actions have gone far beyond the immediate pain experienced by his wives. They have also impacted the children and the overall family structure. For Kody, it seems that his focus on his own needs, desires, and emotional fulfillment has led him to neglect the needs of the very people who once supported him unconditionally. Instead of fostering a family environment built on mutual respect and shared responsibility, Kody's actions have created a fractured family dynamic where each wife feels isolated, unimportant, and emotionally abandoned. Christine's decision to leave was the first major crack in the foundation of the family, but it was not an isolated incident. As more wives began to recognize the emotional toll Kody's neglect was taking on them, they too began to withdraw. Janelle's emotional distance grew as she chose to disengage from Kody, while Mary, who had been emotionally neglected for years, found herself more and more alone in a family that no longer felt like home. This fragmentation of the family structure is not just the result of one event.
it is the cumulative effect of years of Kody's poor decisions and inability to address the emotional needs of his wives. The fallout has been significant, and it seems that the damage may be beyond repair unless Kody takes responsibility for his actions and makes a genuine effort to rebuild trust with each of his wives. Robyn's role, an unintentional catalyst for division. Although Robyn Brown is Kody's favorite wife and the one he appears to be most emotionally invested in, her role in the family dynamic has only served to amplify the divisions that already existed. While Robyn may not have directly caused the emotional neglect of Kody's other wives, her position of favoritism has undoubtedly made it worse. For Christine, Janelle, and Mary, seeing Kody's preferential treatment of Robyn created feelings of jealousy, resentment, and insecurity. They were forced to watch as Robyn received the emotional validation, affection, and attention that they so desperately needed but were never given. Robyn's position in the family, while not of her making, placed her at the center of a power struggle that she was ill-equipped to handle. Over time, Robyn found herself caught between the other wives' frustration and Kody's emotional demands, creating an additional layer of tension that made it difficult for her to connect with her co-wives in a meaningful way. Robyn has often been portrayed as the scapegoat in the family drama, but in many ways she has been a victim of the same toxic dynamics that have plagued Kody's marriages. While she may have been Kody's emotional confidant, her role in the family has come with its own emotional burden. Robyn, like the other wives, has had to navigate the complex emotional landscape created by Kody's neglect and favoritism. Unfortunately, her involvement in this emotional turmoil has only fueled the divisions between her and the other wives, leading to a further breakdown in family unity. The children's experience, growing up in a divided home. The emotional fallout from Kody's behavior has not only affected his wives, but has also had a profound impact on the children within the family. Growing up in a polygamous family is already challenging enough, but when there is tension between the parents and emotional neglect running rampant, it creates an unstable environment for children to thrive in. For the Brown children, the division between their parents is evident. The favoritism Kody has shown toward Robyn has created a rift between the children of each wife, as they struggle to understand why their father's attention is so focused on one wife and her children, while the others feel left out. This type of emotional inconsistency can lead to confusion and resentment, with children feeling as though their emotional needs are secondary to Kody's relationships with his wives. Christine's children, for example, have witnessed their mother's emotional struggles for years, and many of them have expressed how difficult it was for them to see her endure such neglect. Their loyalty to their mother, as well as the emotional toll of watching her suffer, has caused a rift between them and Kody. Similarly, Janelle and Mary's children have also been affected by the dysfunction in the family, feeling the tension between their mother and Kody and struggling to understand why their family dynamic was so different from what they saw in other homes. For Robyn's children, the emotional fallout has been just as complicated. While they have benefited from Kody's affection and attention, they have also seen the strain it has caused within the family. The division between the children of the different wives has created an atmosphere of discomfort, where the children are often forced to navigate loyalties to different parents and siblings. The emotional instability within the family is undeniable, and it raises questions about the long-term effects on the children's mental health and relationships. Growing up in a home where emotional neglect and favoritism are rampant can lead to issues of insecurity, low self-esteem, and difficulties forming healthy relationships later in life. The Brown children are no exception to these potential consequences, and their experiences in the family dynamic will likely shape their futures in profound ways. The growing divide, how Kody's marriages are unraveling. At this point, it is clear that Kody's marriages are unraveling at an alarming rate. The emotional neglect, favoritism, and manipulation that have been allowed to continue for so long have reached a breaking point. Christine's departure was the first sign of trouble, but Janelle and Mary's emotional withdrawal has compounded the issue. The family that was once unified by Kody's vision of plural marriage is now divided, with each wife seeking emotional support and validation outside of the family. For Kody, the unraveling of his marriages has been a wake-up call, but it seems that he is struggling to grasp the full extent of the damage he has caused. Instead of addressing the emotional needs of his wives, Kody continues to focus on Robyn, leading to further frustration and resentment from his other wives. Kody's inability to communicate openly and honestly with his wives has made it difficult for him to rebuild the relationships that have been so badly damaged. The damage to Kody's marriages is now undeniable. The emotional fallout has created a toxic environment where trust and communication have broken down completely. Until Kody takes responsibility for his actions and addresses the emotional neglect that has caused so much harm, it is unlikely that the Brown family will ever be able to heal or rebuild what has been lost. The hope for healing. Can the family find a path forward? Despite the immense emotional damage, there is still hope for healing within the Brown family. For healing to occur, however, Kody must first take responsibility for his actions. He must recognize the emotional neglect, manipulation, and favoritism that have driven his wives away and made the family environment toxic. This means acknowledging the pain he has caused, accepting that his behavior has damaged the family, and taking steps to change his ways.
The road to healing will not be easy, and it will require both Kody and his wives to make significant changes. Kody will need to learn how to be emotionally available, to communicate openly and honestly, and to validate the feelings of his wives. In turn, his wives will need to set healthy boundaries, rebuild their self-worth, and reclaim their emotional independence. While the road ahead is uncertain, there is still a chance for the Brown family to heal and find a way forward, but this will require a deep commitment to change from everyone involved. Without this commitment, the cycle of emotional neglect and division will continue, and the family will remain fractured. The fallout from Kody's emotional neglect has created a family in turmoil. The emotional strain, favoritism, and neglect have caused irreparable damage to Kody's marriages, leading to a breakdown in family unity. However, there is hope for healing if Kody takes responsibility for his actions and begins to prioritize the emotional well-being of his wives and children. The path to healing will be long and difficult, but with effort and open communication, the Brown family may have a chance to rebuild. The road to recovery for the Brown family will be a long and difficult one. The emotional damage caused by Kody's neglect, his failure to prioritize his wife's needs, and his continued favoritism toward Robin has deeply affected not only his marriages, but also his relationships with his children. The emotional scars that have been left behind will not be easily healed, and it's unclear whether the family can ever truly return to the unity they once had. For Kody, the journey toward rebuilding these relationships requires more than just a surface-level apology or an attempt to regain control. He needs to do a deep and honest self-reflection. It's clear that his actions have caused emotional harm to the women he once loved and to his children. Kody must come to terms with the fact that, in prioritizing his own emotional needs and desires, he has hurt the very people who were supposed to be his support system. For the wives, Christine, Janelle, Mary, and Robin, moving forward will require emotional healing as well. The years of emotional neglect have left them with feelings of unworthiness, rejection, and betrayal. It's essential for them to reclaim their self-worth and take control of their own emotional well-being. No matter how much they may love Kody, they must prioritize their mental health and rebuild their confidence outside of his validation. The Brown family has been through a lot, and while healing is possible, it will require hard work, patience, and a collective effort from everyone involved. Kody must be willing to make the necessary changes and address the underlying issues that led to the emotional neglect. The wives, on the other hand, will need to learn how to set healthy boundaries, navigate the complexities of their relationships with Kody, and find peace within themselves. Kody's reflection: has he learned from his mistakes? In the wake of Christine's departure and the growing emotional distance between him and Janelle, Kody is facing a critical turning point. His failure to meet his wife's emotional needs has left him isolated, and the family he once cherished is now broken. Kody must now reflect on the choices he made and ask himself whether he is truly ready to change. Kody's past actions have often been motivated by his desire to maintain control over the family dynamic. But the reality is that his need for control has caused the family to fracture. His refusal to acknowledge his wife's emotional needs and his tendency to avoid difficult conversations have made it impossible for the family to function as a cohesive unit. If Kody wants to salvage any part of his relationship with his wives and children, he must be willing to let go of his need for control and embrace vulnerability. For Kody, the first step in this process is acknowledging the harm he has caused. He must take responsibility for his actions and recognize that the emotional neglect of his wives was a form of abuse. This acknowledgement must be followed by a commitment to change, by showing through his actions, not just his words, that he is willing to prioritize his wife's emotional needs moving forward. Christine's departure: a catalyst for change or the final straw? Christine's decision to leave Kody was a pivotal moment in the Brown family's journey. It was the first time that one of Kody's wives had taken a definitive step to break away from the family structure. Christine's departure was not an act of anger or defiance. It was a decision based on years of emotional neglect and unmet needs. Christine's departure has forced Kody to confront the reality that his actions have consequences. For years, he had been able to avoid truly addressing the emotional strain in his marriages, but Christine's departure forced him to face the fact that he could no longer ignore the damage he had done. While Christine's departure may have been a painful and difficult decision for her, it also served as a wake-up call for the rest of the family. For Janelle and Mary, Christine's move was a powerful reminder that no one can continue to endure emotional neglect indefinitely. It's possible that Christine's departure will serve as a catalyst for the other wives to reevaluate their own relationships with Kody and to consider what they truly mean in order to feel valued and heard. For Kody, Christine's departure is a clear message that the status quo cannot continue. He must learn to be emotionally available to his wives, not just physically present. If he is to have any chance of rebuilding his relationships with them, he must take responsibility for the emotional damage he has caused.
As we continue to delve into the unraveling of Kody's family, it becomes evident that the healing process will require a monumental effort from all parties involved. Kody and his wives must navigate years of emotional neglect, misunderstandings, and broken trust. Whether or not they can reconnect is not just about love. It's about mutual respect, communication, and vulnerability. The first crucial step in rebuilding their relationships is for Kody to recognize the deep emotional harm he has caused. Acknowledging this damage is not enough. Kody must actively show through his actions that he is willing to change. Emotional neglect is not just a mistake, it's a betrayal, and it takes time to heal from that kind of betrayal. Kody must stop focusing on his desires and begin to prioritize the needs of his wives. For so long, he has been blinded by the idea of maintaining control, but this controlling nature has led to emotional damage in his relationships. For any hope of reconciliation, Kody needs to actively work on understanding his wives' emotional needs and meet them where they are. Similarly, his wives need to be open to the possibility of rebuilding these fractured relationships. They have been emotionally starved for years, and the scars from this neglect will not disappear overnight. They must process their pain, set healthy boundaries, and be honest about what they want and need from Kody. This may mean confronting hard truths about themselves and their marriages. A step toward accountability: Kody's apology. For Kody, an apology is necessary, but it cannot be just a blanket statement. To begin healing, Kody must express specific remorse for the pain he has caused each of his wives. He needs to take accountability for the emotional neglect and favoritism that have been the cornerstone of the family's disintegration. Kody's apology must also acknowledge the broader impact of his actions. His behavior has not only damaged his relationships with his wives, but it has also hurt their children, their emotional well-being, and their sense of family unity. This kind of genuine accountability can pave the way for healing, but it must be backed by consistent actions that show he is truly committed to change. While the wives may be skeptical, a sincere apology would be the first step toward restoring trust. But Kody's actions will have to match his words, and it will take time for the wives to rebuild the trust that has been broken. This healing process is not something that can happen overnight. It will require consistent effort from Kody and a willingness from his wives to give him the opportunity to demonstrate that he is capable of change. The importance of communication: rebuilding emotional intimacy. One of the main reasons Kody's relationships have suffered so greatly is the breakdown of communication. For years, Kody and his wives have avoided addressing difficult conversations, and when they did speak, it often led to emotional wounds rather than healing. Without honest communication, misunderstandings fester, resentments build up, and emotional walls are constructed. Rebuilding their relationships will require a complete overhaul of how Kody and his wives communicate with each other. They will need to engage in difficult but necessary conversations about their feelings, needs, and grievances. Open and honest communication will be essential in rebuilding trust and emotional intimacy. Kody and his wives must also learn how to be emotionally vulnerable with each other. This includes acknowledging their fears, insecurities, and desires in a safe and non-judgmental space. Emotional vulnerability is the foundation for deep connection, and without it, relationships remain superficial and fragile. Kody's wives have been neglected emotionally for so long that they may struggle to open up, fearing that their feelings won't be heard or validated. Kody must be patient and committed to listen without judgment. The wives, in turn, must express their emotions honestly, even when it's uncomfortable. This process will require patience, compassion, and a willingness to hear the other person's truth without becoming defensive. The role of therapy in healing the wounds. While communication is essential, it's clear that the Brown family's issues go beyond what they can resolve on their own. Therapy or counseling may be necessary for them to address the deep-rooted issues within their marriages and family dynamics. Therapy can provide the structure and guidance needed to navigate complex emotions and restore trust. Therapists can help Kody and his wives uncover the underlying causes of their dysfunction, work through past traumas, and provide them with the tools to communicate effectively and heal emotionally. Therapy can also help them understand the impact of their actions on each other and teach them how to rebuild a healthier family dynamic. For Kody, therapy can help him gain insight into the emotional needs of his wives, particularly the need for emotional availability. It can also help him understand why his need for control has driven such a wedge between him and his wives. For Christine, Janelle, Mary, and Robin, therapy can offer a safe space to process the hurt they've experienced and provide them with strategies to reclaim their self-worth and rebuild their emotional strength. While therapy is not a quick fix, it can provide the necessary support and guidance for the family to rebuild. It's important to note that healing doesn't happen instantly. It's a gradual process that requires ongoing effort from everyone involved. Christine's role in the healing process. Christine's departure has been a pivotal moment for Kody and the rest of the family. While Christine's decision to leave was not an easy one, it has given her the space to heal and rediscover her own emotional independence. For Christine, leaving Kody was an act of self-love. She realized that she could no longer stay in a relationship where her emotional needs were ignored. Christine's journey is one of reclaiming her self-worth and taking control of her emotional well-being. For the other wives, Christine's decision may serve as a reminder that emotional neglect is not something that should be tolerated. Her courage to step away from the relationship could provide the other wives with the motivation to take their own emotional needs more seriously and refuse to settle for less than what they deserve. As Christine continues to find healing and grow stronger in her independence, she may play an important role in encouraging the other wives to reclaim their own sense of self.
Her example could serve as a powerful catalyst for change within the family. While Christine's departure has certainly caused a rift, it may ultimately be the push the family needed to face their issues head-on and make the changes required to rebuild. The children's future, breaking the cycle of dysfunction. One of the most important factors in the healing process is the impact on the children of the Brown family. Growing up in a home where emotional neglect and favoritism were rampant has likely left lasting emotional scars on the children. But the hope is that with effort, they can break free from the patterns of dysfunction that have shaped their upbringing. As the adults in the family work on their relationships, it's crucial that they also focus on rebuilding their relationships with their children. The children need to feel safe, heard, and valued within the family. Emotional neglect has the potential to negatively affect the children's mental health and ability to form healthy relationships later in life. Therefore, it's important for Kody and the wives to show the children that they are loved unconditionally and that they are a priority in the family. Rebuilding these relationships will require patience and intentional effort. Kody and his wives need to invest in their children's emotional well-being, listen to their concerns, and offer support as they navigate the aftermath of family dysfunction. By providing a stable, loving environment and showing the children that emotional health matters, the family can begin to heal and break the cycle of neglect. Conclusion: is rebuilding possible? Despite the immense emotional pain and dysfunction the Brown family has endured, there is still hope for healing. Kody and his wives must take responsibility for their actions, rebuild trust through consistent communication, and engage in therapy to address their deep-rooted issues. Christine's decision to leave may have served as the catalyst for change, but the road to healing is long and requires a commitment from everyone involved. The family will need to be patient with one another and make a collective effort to rebuild. If Kody and the wives can put in the necessary work, there is a possibility that they can rebuild what has been lost. But healing will not happen overnight. It will require ongoing effort, vulnerability, and an unwavering commitment to emotional well-being for the entire family. The Brown family's journey has been marked by a series of emotional and relational shifts, each one leaving its own scars. As Kody and his wives work toward healing, the question remains, can they rebuild their unity after everything that's happened? The emotional damage, years of neglect, and broken trust will require more than just words. The process of repairing their family relationships will demand actions that match their promises and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths. Family unity was once at the heart of the Brown family's beliefs. Their plural marriage, while unconventional, was meant to represent a commitment to each other's well-being. But over the years, Kody's actions have strained this unity, particularly through his emotional neglect and his inability to effectively communicate his feelings. In many ways, the Brown family has been drifting apart, with Kody and his wives facing increasing emotional isolation from each other. Rebuilding this unity will require a shift in mindset and a genuine commitment to putting the family first. This involves more than simply restoring the connection between Kody and his wives. It also means healing the broader family relationships that have been impacted. The children, in particular, have witnessed the fracture in the family, and their sense of security and belonging has been affected. Rebuilding family unity will involve Kody and the wives coming together to reaffirm their commitment to creating a safe, supportive, and loving environment for their children and each other. Kody's role in restoring family trust. For the family to heal, Kody must step into a leadership role, but not in the way he's been accustomed to. This isn't about asserting authority or control, it's about taking responsibility for his past actions and showing his family that they value them through his actions. Kody's leadership now needs to be grounded in vulnerability, empathy, and active listening. One of the first things Kody needs to do is stop avoiding difficult conversations. For years, Kody's failure to communicate openly with his wives about his emotions and needs has contributed to the breakdown in their relationships. It's crucial that Kody begins to acknowledge his shortcomings and express his regrets, not just about the larger issues like the failure of his marriages, but also the smaller day-to-day actions that led to feelings of neglect and hurt. Rebuilding trust is never easy, especially when it has been shattered. But Kody's willingness to be emotionally available, to communicate his needs clearly, and to validate his wife's feelings will be critical in showing that he's ready to rebuild the family. Kody must demonstrate through his actions that he is capable of offering the emotional support that his wives need, and that he recognizes the sacrifices they've made for the sake of their shared family. The wives' role in rebuilding trust, setting boundaries, and demanding respect. While Kody must take responsibility for his actions, the wives also have an essential role to play in the healing process. They must reclaim their emotional power and set firm boundaries with Kody. For so long, they have tolerated emotional neglect, and it's time for them to assert their needs and demands. Setting boundaries is crucial in any relationship, especially one that has been as strained as the Browns. Each wife must clearly communicate her needs to Kody, establishing what is acceptable behavior and what is not. These boundaries are not meant to punish Kody, but rather to protect their emotional health and ensure that their needs are met moving forward. The wives must also demand the respect they deserve. Kody's favoritism and emotional neglect have often made them feel secondary in his life. In order to heal and move forward, they must insist on equal treatment and emotional validation. Each wife should be able to feel like an equal partner in the family, regardless of how much attention Kody gives them. If they continue to allow Kody's behavior to go unchecked, they will only perpetuate the cycle of neglect that has caused so much damage. It's important for the wives to lean on each other during this process. While Kody may be emotionally unavailable, they have each other for support. Through open communication and mutual understanding, the wives can form a stronger bond that will empower them to take back their emotional independence and demand the respect and attention they deserve. The role of therapy and support systems in rebuilding.
Therapy, once again, plays a critical role in the healing process. It's clear that the Brown family's issues go beyond what they can resolve on their own. Therapy can provide the structure and guidance needed to navigate complex emotions and restore trust. Therapists can help Kody and his wives uncover the underlying causes of their dysfunction, work through past traumas, and provide them with the tools to communicate effectively and heal emotionally. Therapy can also help them understand the impact of their actions on each other and teach them how to rebuild a healthier family dynamic. For Kody, therapy can help him gain insight into the emotional needs of his wives, particularly the need for emotional availability. It can also help him understand why his need for control has driven such a wedge between him and his wives. For Christine, Janelle, Mary, and Robin, therapy can offer a safe space to process the hurt